It's the next day now, and I've got my top glued up. Just wanted to show that to you. I've got the about 1.75 inch strip glued on this side, about a 3/4 inch strip on this side. It looks pretty good. Now this is too wide now for me to surface on my 12-inch jointer here, so I'll take this to school and finish it up. The front apron I'm going to leave a little extra thick because that's going to get cut apart and glued back together. So on to the legs. The first thing I want to do is make sure that the jointer fence is very square. That's really important for the legs. Note that I have a European style guard on my jointer, so it's a little different than the pork chop style guard we have on the jointers at school here, so it operates a little differently. So I am surfacing the largest face on this particular leg. They're not quite square, so I'm doing the bigger of the two faces. And then once I have the face done, I want to mark the face so I remember which one I did. So you see in the bottom left there, I use what's called an F mark. So now I'm going to put that face up against the fence and joint the adjacent face. Or yes, you could call it an edge in this case. I had to move the guard out of the way a little bit there. I'm also making sure I'm not setting the stock down on shavings or sawdust or whatever. I want to make sure I've got a clean surface there. Now this edge was not particularly straight. You can see the front edge of the board is up in the air a little bit, so I'll take another pass or two here to make sure it's nice and straight. Now one thing that's really important is notice how I'm holding the front push block. It's really important that you keep that first reference surface up against the fence. If you just push down on the board, you could have a gap along the bottom edge of the fence and not even notice it because you're just looking at that top corner. So notice I'm putting pressure as much as I can on that edge, that outer edge, but pushing down low on it. Now that I'm just double checking there. Now that it's nice and square, I can put the pressure on it a little bit better here by going back to the top. So it's really, really important that corner that we're establishing there is square. So once I've got that done, I'm happy with that. And I'm going to put a V, if you notice again on the bottom left there, a V that attaches to or is adjacent to that F. So now I've got the boards at the table saw. Now I want to make sure they're all in the same orientation so that I can just pick them up and rip them to width. So I'm also turning that reference corner down, and so that'll allow me to have a reference against the table and against the fence. So I'm going to cut these about a 1/16 or so oversized. I'm going to get them pretty close to final, and then once I'm done ripping them, I will double check to make sure they're square and then run them through the planer one last time to get the last two faces parallel to the opposite faces. So that's the last leg. And now what I'm going to do is reorient them so I can saw the other face, which means I'm going to have to turn them around to once again get a reference face flat on the table and up against the fence. And I'm putting them all in the same orientation so I can just pick them up and cut them and not have to think about turning them during the sawing operation. So the legs are all cut square now, and I want to make sure they didn't move much when I trim them. Sometimes, removing material will cause things to warp. But those all to go together nicely. I don't really see any gaps there. I'm going to rotate them. That looks great. Now, it's possible they all are warped this way and they just happen to match. So if I turn one of them around, that would tell me if they're warped in that way, which they're not. So this all looks great. So I just ripped them a little bit oversized because I just want to leave myself a little wiggle room in case I did need to straighten something up. But what I'll do now is run these through the planer down to my final size, and I'll make sure that my reference marks are always down and the legs will stay square. Okay, these are now surfaced to my final dimension, which in my case is 1 5/8, and they look great. I've got virtually no gaps there, no matter how I turn them. That also tells me that these are square, right? If I had messed up and made parallelograms, or technically a rhombus, an out of square, then I would see a gap when I turned these. I may have got a teeny gap there. That's just because it's not quite straight. But these look really great. So I'm real happy with that. I just need to cut them to length. On my aprons. Now, I think I'd said earlier that I was going to mill the sides and rear apron down to final, but I don't want to do that yet. What I'm going to do next is cut up my front apron so I can get the drawer front out of it. I'll get it set up, glue it back together, and then mill it to final thickness. And at that time, I will mill the rest of these because I want all of these to be exactly the same thickness. That will make cutting the tenons much easier. So next up, cut these to length, and we'll start cutting up the front apron. So I always is a big word, but I try to sticker my material when I'm not working on it. So the air can always get to all sides of it. So I strongly suggest you do that. And I'm putting the order here. I mean, it's not important, but the legs I'm going to get to last in the scheme of things here. This is my next part. So I'm just stacking them roughly in the order I think I'm going to be using them. Note that I still have numbers on the bottom here, right? I've milled them and I still know what part belongs to what. So we're good for now.